What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over improving our interaction system once again. This time we are going to be merging our different types of interaction, so looking at an item to interact with it using our Hitscan, as well as our overlapping. So as you already know, we can go up to an item and look at it, and a prompt will display at the bottom of our HUD there that says press E to interact with test object 1. This is good news because we are able to look at items that interact with them, so if we want to go up to a door and open it, we could do it using that method. However, sometimes things like weapons, they will fall to the ground after an enemy is defeated, and we may want to pick it up without having to look at the ground. So we just walk over it, we may want to still be able to pick it up. So before in the series we were using the overlap method. They're both useful for different reasons. Some games use one or the other, and some do use both. We're going to be going over using both in this episode today. So you'll see that I can look at my blaster to pick it up, and let's go to a different weapon. I can look at my bruiser or my Kingslayer. I can look at any of them and I can pick them up. Additionally, I can walk over to my Kingslayer, and yes, I'm looking at it, so it says press E to equip. If I stop looking at it, then the press E to equip goes away. Now let's say I'm not looking at it, but I walk close enough to it. You'll see that it says press E to equip, because I'm within a given range of it. I'm within the overlap collider. The same is true for all the weapons. I haven't set it up for the individual objects. We have to look at them. However, weapons and pickups, we can just walk within the general vicinity and we'll be able to equip them. Looking at them while we're overlapping with them also doesn't cause any issues. We can do that as well. If I am in range of interacting with an object that I look at, then that is going to take priority over what I'm overlapping with. So we can press E to interact with test object 1. You'll notice I haven't picked up the blaster, even though I am overlapping with it. However, if I look away from the item, or the interactable object, and then I press E, even if I'm not looking at the blaster, you'll see that I pick up the blaster. So the hit scan takes priority, but overlap is also still important, and it is useful for us to be able to accomplish both of these types of interaction in our one system. So there you go guys, that's what we're going to be covering today. If you want to get caught up in the series before we do that, I'll link you to this playlist right here in the top right corner. You can check out all the content we've done and how we've reached this point in the series. Alternatively, if you just care about interaction, I'll link you to the first part of interaction right here. And that is where we went over the overlap interaction. So where we actually created that logic, you'll be able to see how we did that in that episode. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to do is go to our code today, and we want to go to our base character.h. For me, that is my FPS tutorial character.h. Now, in the past, we were using interact actor to determine the object that we were going to interact with. This worked for overlap, and it also worked for the hit scan, but it only worked for one or the other because we only had one actor that we could ever set to a value. So if we overlapped with an object, that would be the interact actor. But if we hit scanned, we looked at an object, that would be our interact actor. If we tried to do both, they'd be flipping back and forth. We need a new method here to accomplish both of our interaction methods within one system. To do that, I'm going to leave interact actor, and this is going to be the object that's going to be interacted with upon successful interaction. So this hasn't changed, but just know that this is not going to be the only way we can set an interact actor. Now we're going to add this array here. This is an array of actors, or actor pointers even, and I've called it interactable overlapping actors. As the comment says, the objects, actors, currently overlapping with this character that can be interacted with. If we're not looking at something, the interactable overlapping actors will be used to grab an object that we can interact with and set the interact actor to that value. So add this array. I did make it so we could see it in the blueprint as well. So I have uProperty, edit anywhere, blueprint read write with a category of interact. Then I just made it a T-array of a actor pointer and called it interactable overlapping actors. Since this is an array, you actually don't have to set any values in it by default. You could give it a number, like a maximum that you'd want to put into it, but really none of that's necessary. It is a T-array, and thus it will resize as we add things to it. So we don't have to set that value anywhere. When we're done in the .h file, we can go to the .cpp file. The only place we're going to need our overlapping actors array today is in the tick function. So we can scroll all the way down to the bottom, or wherever your tick function is in your file. Change nothing else but the tick function. So we go to tick and we have our logic to regenerate shields. That doesn't need to change, obviously. We have our hit scan logic, so we're grabbing the variables needed to perform the hit scan. Then we're doing the line trace, and if the line trace is able to come out, we go into it and we check if we've made a blocking hit. If we were able to hit an actor that had blocking properties, then we knew that our line trace had succeeded and hit an object. So at that point, we check to see if the object we hit was of a base interactable actor, which was that cube that we had in the scene. If that failed, we check to see if it was a weapon, so we could interact with the weapon and potentially pick it up. And then we had else, where we were just setting interact actor to null pointer because there was nothing that we were looking at and we were hiding the interaction pop-up. I've commented out these two lines, so instead of doing these two things in the else, we're going to do all of this in the else. Essentially, instead of giving up immediately when we find out that we are not looking at a blocking object that is of a base interactable actor class or a base weapon class, we can look to see if we're overlapping with an object. I do an if check to see if our interactable overlapping actors .num is greater than 0. If it's greater than 0, we have at least one object that we are overlapping with. We haven't added anything to this array yet, so right now it's not going to make sense. You're like, there's nothing in there, so it won't matter. But we will be adding it to the array in a few minutes. Essentially, if anything is in this array, we know that we're overlapping with an actor. We are only going to add things to this array that we want to be able to interact with. That's why it's called the interactable overlapping actors. By default, every character and every actor has an overlapping actors array. That's why I've differentiated it. This is the interactable overlapping actors. Assuming we do have one of those, then actually what we want to do is set the interact actor. I'm setting it to the first index for now. A lot of games, when they have multiple objects that have spawned close to each other or directly on top of each other, if you want to pick up a specific one, you'll have a prompt. You can maybe press a button to switch between what item you're viewing. We don't have anything like that yet, so I'm just using index 0. So basically, whatever the first item that we're overlapping with, that's going to be the actor that we can interact with. At this point, we have an actor that we can interact with, so we might as well trigger our interaction pop-up the same way we did in the hit scans. Now in this case, I'm passing in interact actor. Technically, you could pass in interact actor or interactable overlapping actor 0. Either way would work. In the previous episode with the hit scans, I had passed in the interactable actor up above. That's why I bring that up. So it can be a little bit confusing. So going forward, I'm actually just going to pass in interact actor to trigger interaction pop-up for all the cases where that is applicable. You don't have to make this change. I'm just doing it to be more consistent. So I'm going to set interact actor, and then I'm going to pass it into the trigger interaction pop-up function. However, if we're in this else statement, meaning that we weren't able to look at an object that was of a base interactable actor or a base weapon, we go in here, and we were looking for our overlaps. If this if statement fails, meaning we're not overlapping with any interactable actors, then we will go into the else. That is where you will put the logic that we previously had in the else, where we just set the interact actor to nothing. We can't interact with anybody, and we hide the interaction pop-up. So I'm getting rid of this logic now. It is just inside this else statement. Once that's done, we're done with the entire if statement here, but don't forget about the else. So this if statement was checking to see if a line trace was able to come out and collide with anything. If this fails for any reason, then we were hiding the interaction pop-up and setting the interact actor back to null pointer. This is the same case as above. So at this point, even though we weren't able to look at anything and hit a line trace or a ray cast, we still need to check our overlapping actors now. We're going to do literally the same thing that we did in the previous logic I was just speaking about. So we're going to check to see if our interactable overlapping actors.num is greater than 0. If so, we're overlapping with an actor we can interact with. In which case, we need to set interact actor to the first index in that array, which is index 0. Then call trigger interaction popup, passing in interact actor. Else, if that's false, that means we also aren't overlapping with any actors we can interact with, in which case we should set the interact actor to null pointer and hide the interaction pop-up. That's what we were doing before in this function. That's why I have this commented out. But now I've just moved it into the else statement. So my function looks like that. At this point, we're done in the code, so you can open up your editor. In the editor, we will want to go into our base weapon BP. So base weapon BP for me is my blaster. But essentially this is your parent weapon. Doesn't matter if you have an actual weapon assigned to it like I do here, or if you just have a base class, you're just going to go to wherever your logic is for all your weapons. And you're going to go into the event graph. Now, there's quite a few nodes in here, but the only things we're worried about today are the on-component begin overlap, pickup collider, and on-component end overlap, pickup collider. So these we set up in a previous episode, and essentially we have this collider around the weapon, which is this highlighted box here. And if the player was walking into that, overlapping with it, we were displaying the prompt to be able to pick up this weapon, and we were allowing them to press a key to then equip the weapon. This was good when we only had overlapping, but when we added the raycast and the line trace and the hit scan, whatever it is that you want to call it, when we added looking at an object to interact with it, the logic was getting screwed up because if we were overlapping an actor and then looking at another, it was breaking it. If we go into the event graph and go to these events, you'll notice that we were casting the actor that collided with the pickup collider to our playable character, which is FPS tutorial character, that's the code class, or you could cast your base character BP, it didn't matter. Then from there, we were dragging off of it and calling display equip message. Display equip message was a function that we had in our HUD notify interface. So essentially, you can call this, and depending on the item that it is, it will change the message. The base character BP was the one that handled this event, and so it was taking the text that came in and the item, and it was setting the item to be the interactable actor. This is where the bug was coming in. So just because we overlap with this item doesn't mean we want to set it to be the interact actor. Again, now we have an array of interactable actors, and we want to prioritize the hit scan. So going back into base weapon BP, what I've done is I've gotten rid of the display equip message function call. I know it's ugly, I'm going to clean it up with you live, but this display equip message is not plugged in, so I'm going to remove it. Also going to remove the reroute node I had there. Instead, and in place of that, we're going to do this. Something like that. So instead of calling that function display equip message, what we want to do, cast the other actor, so the actor that collided with the pickup collider, to our FPS tutorial character or a base character BP, just like we were doing. At this point, we can actually drag off of that cast and now find our interactable overlapping actors. You get that array, you drag off of that array and type add unique. And since this is happening in the base weapon BP, self is the weapon that we're adding to that array. That is the weapon that is able to be interacted with. That's how you get this logic right here. And now this is the new on-component begin overlap. This way, we're not automatically popping up that widget every time we overlap with an item that is interactable, such as the weapon. Additionally, we're not overriding the interact actor. That is now handled in the tick function. The on-component end overlap is basically the same thing. So we were casting the object that was leaving the pickup collider. If it was one of our characters, we were then setting the interact actor to nothing and then hiding the equip message. Well, we shouldn't set the interact actor to nothing because the character may be looking at an object that they can interact with. Additionally, we don't want to hide the equip message because, again, if they're looking at it, then not only do we not want to have no actor to interact with, but we also don't want to hide the prompt for the user. So I've disconnected all this logic, but I'm just going to get rid of it. And instead, I'm going to put this in here. Since we're ending the overlap, we're not adding an element to this array. We're removing this element from the array. Assuming the other actor that had left the pickup collider is a character, they're no longer overlapping with it in a sense where they could interact with it. So we need to get the interactable overlapping actors, and we want to call remove this time. I used remove item because we are in the item, base weapon BP, so again we can just pass itself. We have now finished everything we need to in the base weapon BP, but we now need to go into our base character BP and go back to that event display equip message. In here, display equip message, we were displaying the prompt to the user saying press E to equip and then the name of the object. After that, I was setting the interact actor. That's no longer necessary, and it actually shouldn't happen because if it does, it's going to screw up the logic we have now since we have the logic in our tick function. So instead, we just want to call it display equip text. It's not necessary that you change anything about this event in the HUD notify interface. You can leave the item reference if you'd like. It could come in handy later. But for now, all we need to do is grab our HUD reference and call display equip text. So when this function is called, it will only deal with displaying the widget and not actually setting the interaction actor. Now we should be able to look at an object such as a weapon or an actual interactable, and the prompt at the bottom that says press E to interact with or press E to equip should pop up. Additionally, we should be able to walk into an item, overlap with it but not look at it, and the prompt should pop up. If we look at it, nothing should go wrong with that, but looking at another object, such as an interactable object, while we're overlapping with one, should give the object that we are looking at priority over the overlapped object. Anyway, guys, I hope this helped you with your interaction system in your first-person shooter tutorial series or whatever game you may be watching this episode for. If it did, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do, and I just really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon members and supporters. Thank you guys for all you do. I really appreciate it. I'm so incredibly grateful, and I'm having such a fun time working on these series. I'm glad you guys are enjoying them as well. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. It's completely free, and I'd be happy to help you. Anyway, guys, that's all I got, so thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.